Hello, today I'm going to talk about my research which relates to the separation of church and state in the United States. And this is a hotly debated topic, obviously. One that I find personally fascinating, which is why I chose to research it, obviously. I think an important place to start is understanding that this is something that's very strongly tied to language, specific words, and I would argue, right, the nation's history. Through my research, I argue that, or I attempt to make the argument, that the separation of church and state was in fact not designed to act as a way to create a secularity in public spaces, but rather to protect the American people from government overreach infringing upon their religious liberties, which I think is an important distinction because it impacts the way that those laws are then carried out. The things that I used to make this argument, I think if you go back and you look at the motivating factors that help bring about this law in the first place, it sort of tells you what was on the founders' minds at the time of its creation. For example, if you look at where a lot of American immigrants were coming from over to the colonies, they were either leaving, England or Germany, all over Europe, of course. And many of them were coming from places where either the Roman Catholic Church or the Anglican Church had almost a government-like control in the lives of the people. And they were trying to escape that, This force is so powerful that it actually led some people in England to move to the Netherlands before moving to the United States. And you can see some of that in the early colonies and the early settlements within the United States. That was incredibly, profoundly important to them in areas such as Plymouth, right? But then I think if you stay in Massachusetts, you can see a colonial example of the overreach of state-sponsored religious, persecution. And it's an extreme example, but the Salem witch trials, I think, are a distillation of or an extreme example of danger that can come about from religious ideas being put forward by the government as the testing standard on which people should be allowed to continue living or not. And obviously it was a horrible circumstance in which many people died avoidably with very little evidence. And while this is extreme, I think that this represents a broader issue that existed in the United States at the time, which was the sacrifice of individual liberty for the sustaining of a government-based form of religion, which is what I think the Constitution is actually trying to stop, that as opposed to stopping the Bible from being read in public schools. The words of the Founding Fathers are also some of the key things that I discuss or approach in my research. I would like to talk about Thomas Jefferson specifically. He's obviously incredibly influential in both the Constitution and just the general founding of the nation. He actually is being quoted when you say a wall of separation between the church and state. And while many think that's actually in the Constitution, it does not appear anywhere in the Constitution. It came from a series of correspondences that he had with Danbury Baptist in 1802, where he talks about wanting to protect the religious liberty of the American people by creating a wall of separation between the church and state. And I think if you stop and ask yourself, who's supposed to be protected by the wall of separation? Is it the secular existence of public areas or institutions being protected, or is it the American people being protected by the government? I think thorough analysis would suggest the latter, and that's what I attempt to prove in my research. Thanks.